Fong family reunion and sacrament toast. I don't think you're going to see Dawn without a smile all day because she's so happy that you all came. I'm happy to. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Steve. Some of you know me as Steve. And I'm the one who's been sending you all the best emails, getting ready for this reunion. I am one of 5 children of Jean Fong, who was one of the children of Fred and Yi Fong. So for some of us, these were our grandparents. For others of you, these are your great-grandparents, and some of them your great-great. So we're here to honor their memory. They would have been 140 and 141 years old, respectively. Is this your first time here? So quite a few of you have been here before. We also have a 3 times great-grandchild. That would be Sophia's daughter. So it's a big family, and we're honoring them today because without them, none of us would be here. So I knew my grandmother very well. She spent a lot of time with us in Monterey Park at our house. She was a great Chinese cook. And then my grandfather, I never had the opportunity to know because he passed away in 1951, 2 years before I was born. So today, thanks to Donna, you're going to be learning a lot about both of them, our family history. Donna spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on searching our family history and putting our family tree together. So I want to thank Donna. How many of you grew up telling your parents you wanted to grow up and be a genealogist? How many can spell genealogy? but it wasn't Donna's chosen profession, but in her retirement, she has really worked hard on this.
It's been fun.
It's
fun, and it's gratifying, and I love even meeting new cousins and sharing what I know. It's really been special for me.
So I do apologize to Dana because over the past year I probably spent more time with Donna than he has. So it's our hope that one of you or more in the next generation will want to continue with the family tree, keeping it updated. Because as much as we hate to admit it, we're getting up there. So yeah, if anybody's interested in this, Donna, I'm sure, would be happy to educate you on the whole process. And later on today, we'll be learning more about the family tree online that we have. So I wanted to just take a couple minutes to review the itinerary for today. We're going to be hearing from a few of their grandchildren. These are stories that were actually written by some of their children. So we want you to hear it from their own mouths. After that, we're going to go outside and take a group photo. And then we're going to be giving you a break for about an hour. And then our next stop is going to be at the Wackford Community Center, where Donna's going to go in depth into the family history. And there'll be a lot of things on display for you to take a look at. And then right after that, I'll be talking a little bit about the online family tree. So feel free to bring your laptops or your iPads if you'd like to follow along with that. And then at 3:30, it's kind of an early day, at 3:30, we're going to be heading from the community center back over by the hotel, because the restaurant we're having dinner at is just a few steps away from the hotel. And there we've got a nice Chinese dinner planned for you. All right, so with that, Spencer, come on up. Thank you.
Well, it's indeed an honor to be invited to be a part of this wonderful celebration of the lives of Grandma and Grandpa. I was asked to read something that my mother wrote in regards to my grandpa. First of all, I want to extend my deepest heartfelt gratitude to Don and Steve for putting this wonderful get-together together. We're seeing many generations gather on this glorious day to take part in this wonderful celebration. You know, we gather here today to honor Grandpa and Grandma, whose lives touched us across many generations, from the youngest of us to those of us who are further along the trail of life, our cousins, brothers, and sisters. Your strength and stories inspire us. To the younger ones, the world has its challenges, uncertainty, change, hardships. But remember, our grandparents faced their own and built legacies of love, resilience, and perseverance. Draw from that. Stay curious, support one another, and keep moving forward. You have the tools to make this world a better place. And this is an excerpt of a tribute from my mother to my grandfather. My father, Fred Q. Fong, was born in Sacramento, California during the days of the gold rush on August 21st, 1885. I just learned this. My mother was born in China, but my grandpa was born here in Sacramento. So obviously he must have traveled back to China to meet Grandma, get married, have children. He lived a longer life more than most men of his time. He had done many kinds of work: a farmer, Pony Express rider, a county deputy sheriff, a self-declared welfare worker, a court interpreter, an immigration and naturalization officer, a dishwasher, an insurance agent underwriter, a waiter, and an honorary mayor of Sacramento's Chinatown. Also a civil rights worker, and so forth. When we first met again, he was with U.S. Immigration. My father was a good mixer and made friends quickly. He had quite a talent for remembering names. Although serious, his face was easily lighted with an infectious smile. He had a winning voice. People listened when he talked. He was a gifted storyteller with an inexhaustible repertoire of yarns appropriate to any occasion. Even as a little girl, I was one of his most appreciative fans. No matter how often he repeated a well-remembered tale, I sat spellbound, for it was never told the same way twice. My father had an active imagination, and as a good talker, he could have been a successful lawyer, writer, or teacher. Among the most cherished memories of my childhood is a recollection of our family clustered close around Father's favorite rocking chair on a winter's evening, listening to Chinese fairy tales, which always had a moral. Having no television or much of radio in those days, it took the form of priceless dramatic entertainment for us. In those days, a typical family of modest means was held together by many gatherings around the fireplace or the huge pot-belly coal stove in the kitchen or living room. Those were delightful winter evenings. I remember how we used to buy firewood by the truckloads, even coal. Hauling them in was a lot of fun. Father used to pay us a nickel for every armload. However, that type of heating was never ideal. All the other rooms were cold. The family was huddled together. Those nearest the heat were too warm. The others had cold feet. Frequently, there was only one lamp fit to read by. About 8:30, the kids undressed before the fire and exhaled clouds of steam as they ran off to bed. When central heating came in and the whole house was made habitable in the winter, revolutionary changes were wrought in the family life. Everybody agreed that the invention was a godsend. Instead of being bunched together uncomfortably through the entire evening, the family promptly scattered off after dinner. Now everyone had his own room, his own lamp, and could amuse himself in his own way. It was a long step towards the freedom of the individual. But there's something to be said in defense of the fireplace and the dirty old coal stove. They kept the family intact. The arrival of the furnace in the cellar was the first hard blow struck at the traditional American home. Throughout my childhood and youth, we never lived in a house heated by a furnace in the cellar, nor did we even have a cellar. Most of our better off neighbors had cellars for the winter storage of fruits, vegetables, and jams, but it was evidently not within our fortune to be thus equipped. We just dug a deep hole in the ground for storing such things, and our potatoes and peaches kept surprisingly well. Our apples, however, gave us some trouble. Because of the economy, we were forced to eat rotting apples all winter. My father was almost 50 before I was sensible enough to not take much notice of his principles and ideals. It may be that when he was a youth, he too was willing to come at life the hard way, but I doubt it. In his attitude toward me and my brothers and sisters, he was always kind, firm, and just, and played with us often. In the park, he would toss a ball in our direction or show us how to stand on our heads. As my mother's feet had been bound, she was orthopedically handicapped. So father was the one who took us everywhere. To the park, zoo, shopping, visiting, on trips and excursions, church, school, business, and professional establishments. One of my fondest memories was to have the privilege of sitting on a judge's bench following one of the court sessions when my father was the interpreter. Admittedly, my father taught me much. I had an insatiable appetite to know the truth about almost everything and anything. I was always curious about the truth. In fact, my curiosity was so voracious that many of his friends I met in the business office said in astonishment, "Heavens, this little girl has to know everything." The remark was translated for me, and I remember it because at the time I was puzzled. My attitude was, didn't everybody have to know everything? Fortunately, no questions were too trivial for my father to answer. If he didn't know, he'd either show me the way or would stop at nothing to help me find the answers. Without much of a formal education, he was truly a self-made man. He was remarkable. He studied and read everything available in his spare time. He learned about group dynamics, human relationships through his own interest in and concern for people. When he suddenly passed away on December 1st, 1951, at the age of 66, while on the line of duty serving his family, it was a sad and bleak day for all. He is missed by many who knew him, and especially by my mother, Alice Fong.
Thank you, Spencer. Mark, please.
Good morning. My name is Mark. I am Yi Ku Fong's grandson. And I'm going to read yet another excerpt from my mother's memoirs, just like the one you heard from Spencer. Spencer's my brother. So I'll just go ahead and read this and try to keep my composure. So this is the first person from my mother, which was her daughter. Early years with mother. My mother, Yi Shi, the third child in a compact family of only 5, was born on July 19, 1884, in the then very small village of Canton, South China, where her father, Yi Wai-jung, was the headmaster of a country schoolhouse. As a scholar, he was accorded the highest honors. In China for centuries, the scholar has been a person of the greatest prestige. In fact, the old social emphasis placed the scholar at the top, the farmer second, the laborer next, and then the merchant. The scholars were not, as in many civilizations, a hereditary and separate body of intellectuals. They were drawn from all classes of people, and from their ranks came government officials. Whoever was capable could aspire to secure an education and qualify for a government post through the competitive civil service examinations. One can see, therefore, how the ambitious Chinese would strive for learning as the one open road to fame and fortune. As a child, mother was called Fong, and was her father's favorite and always at his heels. From him, she learned about the teachings of Confucius, art, and philosophy. She must have resembled him in many ways: resourceful, patient, ambitious, outwardly quiet, and gentle, as befitted a proper daughter and wife to be. I hereby pay homage to grandfather for bequeathing to her at least a semblance of his heritage. Her father died when she was only 7, but already some impressions were cast. At 12 years old, my mother was sent away to live in a girls' dormitory, where she was given the kind of education which Chinese girls received at home throughout the centuries. This educated the girl for her future tasks as a wife and mother. The womanly virtues would be her chief concern. All her training would be directed towards the one goal of inculcating in her a true appreciation and the constant practice of those moral qualities which would fit her to be a successful wife and mother. In view of the all-important role which the family played in the structure of Chinese society, one can readily see how natural and appropriate this moral education for women was in the scheme of things. Her education she accepted as a matter of course, but probably the biggest upset came when the time arrived for my mother's feet to be bound. She was then about 14. Chinese girls' feet were bound, broken, and thus prevented from growing to normal size because of an ancient version of the Cinderella story which had been handed down and had permeated our taste for generations. The legend was that a prince traveling through the countryside had come upon the footprint of a woman so small and beautifully shaped that he cried out immediately that he must find her. He gave orders that the footprint should be preserved and stated that the woman whose foot it would fit should become his consort. From that time on, abnormal feet on which no one could really walk any distance were considered a hallmark of beauty in China. According to my mother, the process is done by bending the toes underneath the ball of the foot, the big toe curling around the others in such a way as to form a point. Then the whole is bandaged, and the bandages pulled tighter from day to day. It is extremely painful. For an entire year while this was going on, the child not only cannot run, but cannot even walk and must be carried. She gets very little sleep because of the pain and is often ill. Later, when the process is completed, she is virtually crippled. If in some emergency it becomes necessary to hurry, she lurches around, grabbing at doors and furniture for support. When the bandages were first put on Mother's feet, she submitted not only because it was being done to all the little girls of the house, but because she knew if she rebelled, it would bring humiliation on her own mother. She simply could not stand it. She screamed, lay on her back, kicking and yelling, disturbing the entire household. horrifying everyone and generally creating a turmoil. She kept up this bedlam for days, but to no avail. She even came out in open defiance, saying that she would rather have feet which would grow in size to the size of an elephant than to go through that torture. It was her first fight for freedom. It wasn't until the year 1900 when an essay on natural feet influenced the opinion of some of the educated men of the time that a few fathers allowed their daughters' feet to grow in the normal manner. When I was about 7, I sat on mother's lap, round-eyed and still, and listened enchanted to old stories of the past. Of them all, Mulan was my favorite. So let me just stop. So for those of you who don't remember the legend of Mulan, Mulan was the story was an ancient Chinese mythological person. She was a family of 3, the only offspring of 2 parents. So she was the only daughter. And at the time, the Chinese emperor, at that time, I guess they were in war, they decreed that every family needed to send 1 male to war. But because she was the only daughter, that would mean her father would have to go. But her father was sort of sick and elderly, so Mulan disguised herself as a man, and volunteered and went off to war. But she was disguised as a man. But she went on to perform magnificently and miraculously with numerous acts of valor and loyalty and allegiance, and was then awarded special awards by the emperor at the time. So that's what my mom's referring to. So again, I'll go back to this piece. Of them all, Mulan was my favorite. I never grew tired of hearing about her and begged for the story over and over again. Modern psychologists agree that the future of a child is conditioned to a large extent by what happens in the first 7 years of its life. Certainly, Mulan meant as much to me as Joan of Arc meant to a Western child. But the story itself is only a symptom of a much stronger influence, the character of my mother. Mother also related other details of her days. Genteel Chinese ladies of the old regime led secluded lives, and they never went about except in an enclosed carriage. They saw no one but members of their family, or women of other families, and they had few, if any, intellectual pleasures or pursuits. But as compensation for this lack of power outside the home, they came to wield great power within the home. Theoretically, the men were the heads of the families, but in nearly every Chinese house, its real head was the quote-unquote dowager mother, the oldest living woman on the male side of the line. Out of respect to her, the men of the family gave in to her wishes, going against her only in moments of extreme seriousness. As for the rest of the family, all the wives, children, and servants were expected to defer to her as to a queen. Since my mother was a victim of this and other facets of the system, the story of Mulan is actually a projection of the dreams she held originally for herself and later gave to me, again, my mother. She was determined that I should not share her fate, and although physically timid and certainly without formal education in the modern sense of the word, she never ceased to urge me to strike out for myself, to get an education, and to break away from the stifling traditions which surrounded the Chinese woman. Aside from the influence of my mother, I was not inherently too much like my 2 brothers and sister. Just why one child in a family should, from babyhood, be as different from the others as black and white is a mystery of genetics, which I shall not attempt to probe. The second oldest of 4, 1 older brother and a younger brother, and a sister. I was always a sharp contrast to them, as having more energy, curiosity, and high spirit. But in all due respect to them and their uniqueness, they have this tranquility of mind and spirit, which I am still seeking. These introspective details are given, not because they are so interesting in themselves, but because they may serve to make the later struggles in my life more intelligible. Alice, Fong, love. And, you know, when I look at this, it almost, well, when I first read it and really concentrated on this, really brought tears to me. Because, you know, this is not about my mother per se, but, you know, she went through a lot. And she really embodied the spirit of Mulan, not from figure, but just in her fight and her will to keep our family going and to sustain our family and to provide for all of us, even in the midst of my father's struggles, his depression, his verge of bankruptcy. My mother really helped shape my brothers and I, and truly was really the dowager mother. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So far, we've heard stories that were written by their daughter, Alice. Next, we're going to hear stories that were written by my mother, Jean. And after that, you're going to hear a story that was written, it was kind of a documentation of facts that were told by their son, Donald. And those are going to be shared with one of their great-grandchildren. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share what my mother wrote about her father. Cherished memories of Grandpa Fong. These are stories which you may have heard many times before throughout my life. Grandpa, of course, was head of the family according to the Chinese culture. So this is why I'm writing about him first. He was the eldest son of the family who had one older sister and at least 3 younger brothers. He lost his mother at a young age from childbirth. Don't know about his father. Grandpa was born in the city of Lodi, not too far from here, which is where I was also born. He traveled back and forth to China many times. His education was limited due to hardship of the family and had to work to support his younger brothers. But surprisingly, he spoke fluent English as well as Chinese and read and wrote as well. He was considered a self-educated man and was highly respected in the community where we all grew up, which was by the state capital. Grandpa got married in China at the age of 16. He wore pigtails when he was young in China and was very handsome and distinguished looking. His bride, Yi Kui, was only 17 years old. They had 7 children, 4 boys and 3 girls. 3 of them died very young, leaving Uncle Hall, Auntie Alice, and me, your mom. My mom wrote this to us children, and me, your mom, Jean. He was the proprietor of a well-known Chinese restaurant in Sacramento, located near the railroad station, and directly across from the Travelers Hotel. The name of the restaurant was Canton Cafe. He worked there until he retired, I would say for about 25 years, 7 days a week. This is where his children first got some education in business. He taught us how to use the cash register, open the big safe, count and roll up money for deposits, use the check writer, an old-fashioned typewriter, etc. It was a lot of fun, especially on New Year's Eve when the restaurant stayed open until 3 a.m. At other times during the week, the hours were 11 a.m. to 2 a.m., and he had to walk about 6 blocks to get home. In those days, not many people had cars. He used to carry a gun for protection. He had very little rest at night because people woke him up in the early morning hours for help, mainly when they got into trouble with the law and needed him to interpret for them at the Superior Court. He knew many of the judges there. Grandpa was very strict with his children, and back in the old days, parents disciplined their children by spanking them when naughty. Well, he not only spanked us, but lectured us and wanted us to tell him why we were spanked. Not only that, we had to apologize and serve him a cup of tea and promised that it would not happen again. During some of his leisure time, he would gather his children together to listen to his stories regarding the Chinese culture, world news, philosophy of life, etc. This usually lasted for at least an hour, and we had to sit attentively, like a class. As you know, being children, it was hard to sit still, and we just wanted to be with friends and go outdoors to play. At other times, he would walk home between lunch and dinner hours to sweep the sidewalk, water the lawn, and do minor repairs around the house, and to check on his children. Sometimes he would ask us to go help him at the restaurant. So we learned how to make teas by the churn, dry the silverware, chopsticks, fill up the napkin holders in each booth. Oh yes, I also learned how to wrap wonton. I remember eating lunch with the staff of employees and eating watermelon especially, which is my favorite. Rice, I never did care too much about. Grandpa enjoyed playing Santa Claus every year when we were young. We actually believed that there was a Santa Claus. He used to buy big Christmas trees that touched the ceiling, decorated it, went shopping for toys, besides wrapping them all up for each of us. On Christmas Eve, we went to bed early and woke up early to see what Santa brought us. I remember the set of electric trains which he said Santa brought us. No, I remember the set of electric trains which we had for many years, even after Uncle Donald got married. Guess it was mainly for him. He also remembered the teachers in school and usually wrapped up Chinese tea with Chinese preserves for his children to take to school just before Christmas vacation. After retiring from the restaurant business, he and Grandma moved to Los Angeles and became an herbalist. They lived on Slauson Avenue in Vermont for several years. Grandma used to prepare the herb drink for the patients and serve the tea with a handful of raisins to get rid of the bitter taste of herbs in the mouth. He treated only minor cases such as colds, stomach aches, arthritis, sore throat, headaches, etc. No major ailments. Later on in his life, he went into a partnership liquor business besides working part-time at the U.S. Immigration Office in San Pedro. There, he was an interpreter for the Chinese immigrants. He took the bus all the way from Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles to the city of San Pedro, which is a long ways. We had to transfer to another bus to get there. And both he and Grandma used to take the bus to visit us at our first house on Cimarron Street in Los Angeles. You can imagine Grandma walking several blocks after getting off the bus with her deformed feet. It must have been very painful and difficult for her to walk. Suddenly, on December 1st, 1951, Grandpa had his first massive heart attack while helping Uncle Paul move from an upstairs apartment to another location. He passed away on the way back to the liquor store. Because he had a cemetery plot at the Sacramento Memorial Lawn, a big funeral was held there near Chinatown. He purchased these plots when he was around 40 years old. There was a big parade, as I recall, for the funeral, and it was pouring during the procession to the relative's house to remove the wreath on the door before going to the cemetery. This was the Chinese traditional custom in those days. People used to say that even the sky was crying for him because it wasn't really time for him to die. He was still young at the age of 67. Following the interment, there was a big Chinese banquet. With a father so strict, we as children had to study hard, both in English as well as Chinese. He taught us many things about life. So to this day, I think of him often and cherish many happy memories and special moments with him. Even though he's been gone for over half a century, he will always live in my heart forever and ever. So this is to each of my dear children in remembrance of Grandpa Fong, with all my love from Jean, your mom.
Good morning. It's lovely to see all of you here. And I am Joanna, I don't have my name tag, but I'm the daughter of Donald, who is the brother of Jean and Alice. You've heard of them so far. My Aunt Jean wrote this in 2002, titled Cherished Memories of Yi Kui Fong. by Jean Nim. My mother was born on July 19th, 1884 in Canton, China. She was 17 years of age when she married my father as a pictured bride. She had never seen or met him in person until after they were married. Back in China, the bride gets to ride in a beautiful, colorful carriage and would sing poetic songs. She had a beautiful soprano voice. Back then, the custom in China was to have the feet of young girls bound because the older generation wanted them to stay close to the home front and not become wild and run around as in this modern day and age. To me, I think that was torture, to have the feet deformed, making it so painful to walk. A stupid and cruel thing to do to a child, really. The toes were bent underneath to the knuckles. Therefore, you can imagine what it was like to walk on toenails and part of the toes. My mother's shoes had to be custom made after she came to America, and she would place thick swabs of cotton or lamb's wool inside her shoes as padding to make walking a bit easier. At home, she would wear slippers, which were also padded with cotton. Even though she was handicapped since she was a teenager growing up in China, she still had to work. She had a tough life. Even the young had to work out in the fields to harvest food for the family's survival. Everyone had to go out to the wells, which were quite a long walk from the house, to fetch buckets of water to take home to be used for washing, cooking, drinking, and bathing. They even had to go out to chop wood for cooking over a hot stove. They did not have all the modern conveniences that we have in this country. So being born in America, we should all realize how lucky we are and appreciate what we have. I feel a little unsteady. Altogether, my parents had 7 children. The 2 eldest sons, being Soon and Ho, were born in China. My sister Alice was born in Hong Kong. After coming to the United States, another daughter named Edna was born, but she passed away at the age of 8 months from pneumonia. Then I was born as the number 5 child. My brother Donald was number 6. A few years later, the 7th child, Sang Kwong, was born, but passed away when he was only 10 days old due to a bad cold. Mother was a soft-spoken lady and was admired and well respected by the Chinese community in Sacramento. Personal hygiene was of utmost importance to her. She was an early riser and kept herself well groomed up to the day she passed on at the age of 85. She was very artistic with her hands, such as cooking Chinese delicacies, sewing, embroidering, making floral arrangements, hand-hooked rugs, and also a bedspread made with scraps of colorful material, all sewn by hand. She used very fine needles to sew. She taught me how to use the old-fashioned sewing machine, which had to be treaded with the feet. Now that I think about it, that was good exercise for the feet. She also taught me how to make Chinese blouses for her once her eyesight became poor during her later years. Singing was one of her hobbies, even while doing housework and sewing. She even used a broom to dust off cobwebs up in the ceiling. When her kids were naughty, she used to chase us around the house with her broom. We had fun because we knew she couldn't catch up with us with her poor, deformed feet, but it was good exercise for her. She enjoyed making dim sum. I learned how to make it too from observing her. Remember the Chinese tamales I used to make, wrapped with sweet rice, chicken, Chinese sausage, and pork? It was very interesting watching her because she was so artistic with her hands when she made sweet rice dumplings, dipped in sesame seeds and fried in oil. The ha gao, sui gao, etc. were all made with rice flour and filled with pork, shrimp, and green onions. and the long rolled up Chinese tortillas, I would call them gai ching te, were also made with rice flour, with fillings of the same ingredients. It made me happy just thinking about them. Sorry, it makes me hungry just thinking about them. I really miss her cooking. Oh yes, my mother was also a midwife. She delivered at least 6 of Brother Hall's babies before she moved from Sacramento to Los Angeles. My nephews Duncan and Roy were delivered by their own mother, personally at home. Mothers in those days never believed in prenatal care and preferred to give birth at home rather than in hospitals. On her 70th birthday, the Chinese Methodist Church in Sacramento honored my mother with a luncheon, and our family presented the church with a new podium in her honor. In fact, my sister Ellis recently sent me a copy of the program and asked me if I remembered the occasion. It had my name on it as the pianist for one of the members who sang a song called Mother. This was back in 1964, when you kids were small. I must have been about 43 years old at the time. After my father passed away in 1951, my mother moved in with Brother Donald's family. That's my father. For several years, and later moved into a small apartment on College View Drive in Monterey Hills. I would pick her up and bring her over to our house almost every day so she could enjoy cooking her Chinese delicacies for all of us. Never wanting to be an imposition, she always wanted to be taken home before Harry came home from work. This recalled by Steve. She was a wonderful babysitter who took care of all of her grandchildren. To all of us, she was a very caring and understanding person. I took care of her needs for 18 years after my father passed away. On August 18th, 1968, she suffered a stroke, cerebral hemorrhage, while she was at our house on Solar Drive in Monterey Park. She was taken to White Memorial Hospital by ambulance. She went into a coma for about 5 hours and passed away in the middle of the night. Very fortunately, she was with me that particular day. Otherwise, it would have been even more painful for her family to find her at home all alone. Though she has been gone for over 34 years at the time of this writing, we think of her often and miss her dearly. We often remind ourselves that our loved ones are never gone. They live in our hearts forever. My mother wanted us to be proud and not sad that we were able to have her for so many years. She wanted a dignified funeral and wanted us to be happy and look presentable. She was interred next to my father at Sacramento Memorial Lawn. So this is also my wish to each of our children, that when it's time for your parents to leave this world, to enjoy eternal life in heaven. Jean Fleury Fong New, 5th child of Yi Kui and Fred Q. Fong.
Thanks, Joanne. Just a minute.
Oh, sure.
So from what I understand, Donald was interviewed by his son Philip for school, right?
Right, college project.
College project. And so Philip documented everything that Donald said. And then Chris is David and Nancy's son. Chris is going to read what Phil wrote about.
What was said in the interview.
So Donald's grandparents on his father's side. Donald's grandfather, Dak Yim Fong, was born in Placerville, California. He cooked for the Chinese laborers who worked on the railroad in California. Dak Yim Fong went back to China and passed away there. He was 72 years old. Dak Yim Fong married Zhang Shi, but unfortunately she died giving birth. Dak Yim Fong and Zhang Shi had 4 children. Starting with the eldest, they were Fong Yit Ying, the only daughter and eldest child. She never left China. She was said to be very beautiful, and there exists a picture of her somewhere. She died at an early age, and the cause of her death is unknown. Fred Q. Fong, born in Sacramento, August 21st, 1885. He died of heart failure December 1st, 1951 in Los Angeles. Fong Wing Huang was born in 1887 in Sacramento. He died young in 1922 when he was 35. He had 4 sons and 1 daughter. One of his sons, Fong Sig Leong, Harry, is Clark's father. Fong Kingman Russell was born in China. Date unknown. He married Mabel, and they had 8 children. Russell died in his early 60s of pneumonia. Donald's grandparents on his mother's side. His grandmother is Ginger Jang, and he doesn't remember his grandfather. They had 2 children, both were girls. The oldest daughter died in her 40s, her name unknown. The youngest daughter, Yi Hui, was born on July 19, 1884. And Donald's parents. Fred Q. Fong, born September 21st, 1885, in Sacramento. He owned a restaurant, Canton Cafe, for 18 years. When he retired, he became an immigration officer and did a lot of community work for the Chinese. People would call him and ask him to help settle family disputes. He was well known and respected in Sacramento. He went to China 5 times and built a house in the village of Longdongdong, Canton. It was a well-built house with iron bars in the windows, had a big dining room, and 2 big bedrooms. The attic was reached by climbing a ladder. Other houses were close together in the village and were usually all 1 story tall. The house was close to the river where people washed clothes. The same water was used for drinking. Water was carried on a pole on your shoulder to the house, put in a well in the living room, cooking and washing. Fred and Yi Kui were married in Canton, China on July 20th, 1909, and stayed there together in China for 2 years. He was 24 and she was 25. Fred went back to the US and Yi Kui stayed in China for a while longer, until Fred had enough money to send for her. She then went to the US at an unknown date. Yi Kui was born July 19, 1884 in Canton, China, a year older than her husband. She had bound feet, which made it very difficult for her to walk during old age. Yi Kui went back to China once with daughter Alice and brought back son Hao's future wife, Li Chi-yu. Fred Q. Fong moved to LA around 1942 after he retired and bought a liquor store on Sunset Boulevard. He died of heart failure on December 1st, 1951, at 66 years old. After the death of her husband, Yi Kui lived with Donald and Minnie in the housing projects. In 1957, when Donald and family moved to a new tract home in Monterey Park, Yi Kui moved to an apartment. This apartment was in Monterey Park, close to Donald and Jeanne. She was diabetic and had high blood pressure. When she was visiting her daughter Jeanne, she fell and hit her head, possibly a dizzy spell, and suffered a massive hemorrhage. Yi Kui was in a coma before she passed away on August 18, 1968, at the age of 84. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everybody for reading those great stories. So obviously a lot of it was common information, but each one had their own kind of twist, I guess you could say. So this concludes this portion. So now we're all going to just go outside for a group photo, and then from there take a break, and we'll meet at the Wackford Community Center at 12:30 sharp, according to Donna.